Hey there, welcome back to season 7 of the Product to Product podcast. My name is Latif Nanji and I'm the co-founder and CEO of Roadmunk. This season, we're going to explore product sense, what it is and how it fits into your product development lifecycle and how you can get better at it. We'll have PMs share tactical advice as well as their successes and lessons learned. Today, my guest is Michelle Parsons, who is the Chief Product Officer at Hinge. Previously, she held product leadership roles at Netflix, Spotify, and Kayak. Thank you for joining me today, Michelle.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. Excited to be here.
Awesome. So I'm not sure if many people know this, but before you got into product, it seems like you had some experience in high school science teaching for America. And you said that teaching exposed you to outcome-based thinking. Can you talk a little bit about what that outcome-based thinking was like in that environment and give us a little bit of sense of that experience?
Yeah, no, you're definitely right. So I didn't have a typical path into product, and I think that's something that you hear more and more, especially when I talk to people who are in product or who want to get into product. The path is always fairly windy. So I was, to kind of like back up just a little bit, I started out actually as a pre-med, was really focused, really focused on becoming a doctor. I did everything that I possibly could to get the experiences that would lead me to this path of, one day becoming a physician. So I spent some time, my senior year of college, working on a medical kind of health mission to El Salvador. And one of the things that I was doing there was really organizing and leading a group of students to do both on-site one-day medical brigades in different rural communities across El Salvador, as well as public health kind of workshops, so dental hygiene, feminine care, et cetera. And what I started realizing when I was in that kind of environment is that I wasn't actually ever in the room with the doctor. So my goal was I wanted to be in the room with the doctor, talking to these patients, hearing, absorbing, and learning. And I spent all of my time orchestrating and organizing all of these systems around to make those events, possible. And so I took a step back and I said, I'm not sure if going straight into medicine is the right thing for me. I had had a couple other experiences that kind of led me to believe that maybe I just needed to take a pause and reevaluate. I also think that, going to medical is very cost prohibitive. So I also was an education undergrad minor. So I ended up joining Teach for America. I knew that I could do science, and so I said, hey, I would love to teach high school science. I don't know anything about teaching little kids, and so, I think that I would be best set up for success by teaching high school science. So I was lucky enough to go back to my home state of Texas and teach high school 9th and 10th grade chemistry and biology. And it was there that I really started saying, okay, well, I got the whole concept of the curriculum down. I know, how to balance chemical equation, and I know, the cycle of life, but can I really teach students this? And how am I going to be able to measure whether or not I'm actually effectively getting them to the place that they need to be? And at that time, when I was teaching, everything was really oriented and organized around an end-of-year test, especially in Texas. It was a state standardized test. And in order to kind of progress the next grade, you had to achieve, a score of 70 or higher on this test. So as a new teacher, I'm like, okay, well, let's take a step backwards. If my end goal is to get these kids to be able to pass a test at 70% proficiency or higher, how do I organize an entire kind of quarter or a year around the outcomes that are going to be needed to ensure that they actually kind of understand, at the core, these are concepts. So, Teach for America had a really systematic way to really approach teaching around, ensuring that you are using objectives and you were thinking about classroom management. So one of the things that I really started then leaning into was objective-based thinking. That are really oriented around outcomes. So if your objective is, what are the cycles of photosynthesis or the steps in photosynthesis, you have to be able to break those different steps down into their components and then be able to align the content and the exercises around those individual steps. So what I would end up doing is basically creating this tracker that broke down every single objective, aligned every single objective to the specific, point in the text or curriculum that said, that talked about that particular topic. And then at the end of the day or end of the week, when I had either, small quizzes or tests, I could align every question back to a specific objective and then look at the Excel kind of color coded green, yellow, red to see whether or not, the students actually got the objective, what percentage of my students understood and mastered that objective, how many were either in yellow or red. And with that, I could actually create different cohorts or sections within my classroom that really paired up people who were stronger with people who were weaker in a particular area or objective. I also could use that to say, wow, every single one of my students is in red. They did not master this objective. And it would help me basically look and target areas where I might need to either, rejigger the way that I was communicating something, or I could go back and self-reflect and say, was there something I did differently in this topic versus that topic? A different way of explaining, a different tool that I used that helped me be either more or less successful. And in that, I was really able to leverage all of that to actually move the outcomes of my students to some of the highest in our district.
Wow. As someone who has done a degree in organic chemistry, this really speaks to my heart. I don't think we had a podcast that started off this scientific, so I'm really appreciating that. It really sounds like you took and collected a lot of inputs and data from the students, and then were able to not just do one thing with it. You were actually looking at it, how you were performing with that information and if they were receiving it, but also if they needed more help. So there was a multiplicity of things you could do with this, which sounds very much like product management inside of a high school classroom. But this was
Right.
before you had product management as a background, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, absolutely. And I think, that is the most surprising thing is that I think when I reflect and I look back upon my entire career, I actually I actually contribute a lot of my success to those formative moments in the classroom. I think, you said it very nicely where it was not just using a lot of data points and aggregate of that data to understand where are my students, where am I? But I think the other thing in just an experimentation or A/B testing perspective, it gave me the ability to look at did I use different tools then that actually, prevented the successful outcomes from happening or accelerated them, right? Did I use a particular diagram or method or, tactile or verbal or visual? And then I could use those to say, well, the students really responded to this type of tactic. Now, how do I integrate that into other, maybe less seemingly obvious, objectives or pieces of the curriculum? So sometimes you can't use visual or tactics or charts and things like that, but I could figure out, all right, well, if the students really respond to that, how might I integrate those things into these pieces of the curriculum that don't lend themselves as well? And so I think all of those different facets really allowed for me to almost, experiment with my classroom in a way that helped me and the kids really excel within the standards that they were trying to master.
Wow, that's really cool. This seems like an interesting transition because then after that, at Netflix, where you were the product innovation lead for Global Kids and Family, where you had access to, behavioral scientists, consumer researchers, and probably even childhood development psychologists. Can you walk us through, having taken that experience and then walking into this big corporation, how were you able to take some of that intuition and sense and use that in your day-to-day job as a product manager there?
Yeah, and I think I even learned a little bit before jumping into Netflix, at some of my earlier jobs, really in the ed tech space, where I originally kind of left the education space from a teaching perspective and went into ed tech, mainly because I wanted to scale my impact, right? I started evaluating what could I do next and where should I go from here? And it turns out I only can really impact the 160 kids that I have in my sections. And so how do I really scale that impact and do more and take some more of the learnings that I have and impact more users and more people and make more broad change? So I think, to kind of answer your question here, like one of the earliest things I learned from those experiences was working with, kids of different skill sets, of different, learning styles, of different motivating styles, right? Motivating factors. And so I think in the same way that you think of a product manager and a product team, you have a diverse group of individuals working together towards some common goal or outcome. And for me in the classroom, me and my students, we each need to get to a mastery of 7% or above. And I think in a product perspective, we're each trying to get towards a user outcome of X, Y, or Z, or a business outcome of X, Y, or Z. And you have to work together, and you have to also know your limitations, what tools you have kind of at your disposal.
So let me just jump into Pearson's, where you were obviously previously the teacher, and then you worked for a large education corp, and as well as MindTap and Kayak. And through those sort of formidable years in product, were there any defining moments of where you really started to gain your product sense? And what were those pieces of information you were really soaking in to become the product leader you are today?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. For me, and coming from a science background, it's always really been aligning into what users are saying, what they're doing, and then what the data kind of supports. I think, my background in science kind of set me up for a very outcome-based, hypothesis-driven kind of framework to approach a lot of problems. What data do I have that leads me to believe XYZ hypothesis? And then how might I go about evaluating that? What experiment might I come up with? So, in my education technology kind of world of Pearson and Alley-Oop and Cengage, we really didn't have the ability to A/B test. We really had the ability to talk to users. We had the ability to come up with different solutions based off of these hypotheses, and then go and put them in front of users, ask them questions, see how they react. And it wasn't necessarily about what users were saying, but it was really about how they were engaging, where we saw friction in their experience, either talking about understanding or progressing through some solution or system that we built. That really helped me, I think, build that intuition that I needed, that it wasn't just about what users are saying, that they're asking for, this thing is this is a painful experience to use, or this thing is not meeting my expectations. But it was about being able to really dig deeper past what people were saying to how are they engaging with the product? Where in that flow were they actually coming up to a friction point? So in my earliest years, it was really about talking to users, really deeply developing that skill of empathy with and for those users, putting myself directly in their shoes. Like there would be some times where I'm just like, all right, let's flip the persona. Like I am now, my 60-year-old mother, especially when I'm at Spotify. Like, how is she going to interact with a Spotify? She does not even understand, it's really hard for her to figure out even how to download apps. So how are we going to get her into, becoming an active user of some system that is already really at the start, the jump, hard for her to kind of really comprehend. So that's where I started. And I think then, once I was able to really join an organization like Kayak that had A/B testing kind of built into its DNA, pairing the two things, like user-generated insights with actual data and the ability to test its hypotheses, really unlocked my ability to move quickly, but also to orient on the right problems.
I can only imagine when you come from a world in which you're talking to users every day, which can be a very qualitative experience, and then all of a sudden it's a very data-centric world, being able to blend those things might be some magic, but also some friction, because if one particular PM comes from just one of those two backgrounds, is there an example that you experienced where the data just spoke the language for everybody in the room, but your intuitions just felt like they were being misguided by this data? And how did you handle that situation?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, I think even moving to one of my most recent experiences at Netflix, I think, the data so I worked in the kids and family area of Netflix, where our audience were kids and their parents or caregivers. Generally, if you think about the audience of Netflix, it's a very broad population, old, young, different devices, different demographics, different locations. But namely, what drives people to sign up for Netflix and keep coming back and retain is Netflix has a bunch of content, a library of content that continues to be refreshed, that continues to be new. Users discover new content, new favorites, and it's exciting, right? There's always something new to discover. And that's really kind of what the company has built itself around is, they've created the binge, right? That's kind of something that the meme that came out of kind of binging a Netflix show, from end to end. And then like the show hole of like, oh no, what happens after I binge this show? Now I need to find my next thing, and maybe I don't. Maybe it takes me a while to find that. So Netflix is really oriented around how do we ensure that there's always something new for a user to discover. For kids, that's not really what the data is saying. The research and the developmental research and the user research and the data is saying that kids are wanting their favorites. They're coming back to repeat, to rewatch over and over and over and over again. They don't want the next new thing. They want, when they finish Coco Melon or when they finish True in the Rainbow Kingdom, they want to rewind that and repeat it. It doesn't matter if it's the 10th time or the millionth time. They want to see that thing over and over again. And there's a variety of reasons why this is true, right? From a developmental standpoint, you're still learning language, you're learning interaction, you want comfort, you want safety, you want something that's predictable and known. And so we could see that in the research, we could see that in the data. But, when I first joined Netflix, the organization was really just trying to continuously push in on helping kids find their next favorite thing, their next favorite character, the next Netflix original that was coming out, the next new character. And there's a variety of reasons why that was important to the business at the time. My intuition kept on saying like we really need to help build the trust with our youngest members, the kids, and their parents, right? Because it saves parents time if they can get their kid right into the content, the show that they're asking for. We came with this hypothesis that kids aren't asking for Netflix. They're asking for Coco Melon. They're asking for Pokemon. They're not just asking, like, let's just turn on Netflix and browse. They kind of know if they want to come in. They know what they're looking for. And if we can help build up that trust and that comfort and really that self-sufficiency that a kid can come in and say, I can navigate. I don't need my mom or my big brother to go do it for me. I can do it. I can find my favorite show. And then I can go into a system of comfort and trust and excitement and happiness. And then can we use that comfort to then, fulfill our business goals and our content goals of helping them discover. So I think that was like the big learning for me there in that particular case where, there might have been a common belief that we needed to get kids to discover because it was going to be the way that they continue to like come back to Netflix. But the data was saying something slightly different. The research was saying something slightly different. And I think we proved that out with experimentation. But also, I think in this case, a plan for how are we going to incorporate some of those business needs into, the user needs.
Just to go back a few minutes, you actually mentioned something that was interesting about how you were doing user interviews and how their feedback was almost not really that useful. And I think you were thinking of a specific case where your observations were actually more useful than what they were saying. Can you talk about what an example of that would look like in which you're paying attention to something that they don't even know that's happening to them, that could be good or bad, that you're able to take those nuggets out? Because I think those types of experiences as a product manager start to really hone in on our product sense. And I was just curious to know what an experience of that looked like for you.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that to me is one of the things that sets a good and great product manager apart is being able to kind of go, move through and move past what users are saying and really interpret kind of how they're saying it or what they're doing in conjunction with what they're saying. I think even like looking at my most recent experience, here at Hinge, our goal here at Hinge is we are the dating app designed to be deleted. We really want users who, we want to help users find their match, their pair. We are the intention to dating app, which means that we primarily attract a population of users who are interested in longer term relationships, more meaningful, more intention, not necessarily this like hookup. And so one of the things that users oftentimes are asking for, because, you might want a long-term relationship, but you as a user, might have a variety of things going on in your environment, in your day-to-day, maybe your interactions with individual people that can change kind of what you're looking for in that particular moment or that particular person. So one of the things that users always come in and write into us about, or when we do user research, they tell our researchers is that, they really want to understand what the intention, what the other user is looking for. Are they looking for something casual? Are they looking for a long-term, something serious? They want to be able to filter on people who are looking for something serious, looking for something casual, and that's going to help them find a cohort of users that best kind of represents their intentions as well. Well, it turns out that it's not as cut and dry as that, right? If we just put a feature on the app that says, like, are you looking for a long-term relationship or for a hookup or for something casual, well, that is going to be impacted by who you actually meet on the app, right? Do I meet this person or that person? And then how do I respond to them? Are they, And so it's not as straightforward as saying yes or no or black and white. Actually, please cut that black and white, please. It's not as straightforward as saying like yes or no or this or that. It really is more nuanced. And so when users ask for this feature, when we try to give a variety of it, it never really works out in the way that users expect it to be, because then it's either too restrictive, it's not specific enough, and we're not meeting their exact needs. And so the question that I ask myself is, it's not necessarily about, are you looking for a long-term relationship or are you looking for something casual? It's like, how do I understand how much you're going to invest in this experience, whether or not it turns out to be something long-term or something more casual, right? Do I put a lot of effort into my profile? Do I have, longer answers to my prompts? When I send a like, do I send it with a comment or not? And so there are other things around intentionality as a topic that actually are more meaningful than me saying, I want a long-term relationship or I'm looking for something casual.
That's brilliant. Just thinking about that as a problem that you would give to someone, their gut reaction, and I think anyone who's a PM listening might go, oh yeah, well, you could just ask them and they could fill it out. But to really look truly underneath the covers of the depth of a problem like that, you realize that's just simply not going to be how humans operate. And there's other pieces of data and information collected from their whole profile that seems to provide more insights. That's a great example. Working at a company now in such a space, and given the current climate in the world, how are you thinking about the future of what tools you use to gain information, right? I think having such a great CV of experience with some very popular companies, what are the tools you use to help get your team up to a level, or that product sense to a level in which they're able to start sniffing out these types of problems and then being able to make these types of larger decisions or thoughts that can really help impact the product going forward?
Yeah, and I'm glad you bring this up, because I actually think that this is one of the single most important things that I think product teams can really do that will determine whether they are really successful or just kind of like meeting the standards. Product teams are a team, they're a group. They are really needing to kind of be a symbiotic, they have symbiotic relationships with one another. Data scientists, researchers, designers, product managers, engineers, QA, right? We're all working together to facilitate some end goal. And verbal and written communication are the two most important things to ensuring there is alignment, right? We all understand what is happening, when it's happening, why it's happening. And so one of the things I think that is really important to say is a really good spec. A really good, written documentation of, hey, what is this feature? Why are we building it? Do we really set up the narrative of what's going on? Hey, here's some background context and some data that we have that lends itself to support the idea that if we do, X, Y, Z thing, that these outcomes will be the results of them. Right? Beyond just having that framework, the other thing that I think is really important up front is the decision-making criteria around whether something will or will not be successful. And so that's where you really start to dig in with your data scientists to understand, like, how are we going to measure this? What things do we need to ensure we have tracks to make decisions? And then based off of, A, B, C, or D, we'll respond by making, X, Y, or Z decision. And aligning on that upfront saves a lot of time and a lot of the back and forth in the debate of how are we going to proceed, right? So I think that's number one. I think beyond and before we actually get to like the actual execution of a product spec and what we're going to build, upfront is aligning on what is that roadmap of work look like, and all of that is then aligned back up to an outcome. What are you as a product team and as a work stream or as a group actually trying to deliver, both for your users and then for your business? How are you going to measure that? And so really working with my teams to say, hey, what research and data do we have? What have we seen be successful? What gaps do we currently and what gaps do we currently have, within our current app, our current structure that is preventing us from serving those users? Or if we don't do this, are we at risk of, are we presenting major risk from competitors coming in and kind of taking that piece from us? Orienting around this outcome. So what outcome are you trying to drive? What is that metric? How are you measuring that? What's that key result you're going after? To what means or to what end? And then how do I then enable the product teams to actually together do a lot of that discovery work for themselves? So, I really think it's really important as a product lead, anybody who's out there like really driving product organizations to be really clear on those outcomes and objectives, and then help organize their teams around good discovery of those opportunities. I do think that people oftentimes will jump straight to solutions, right? If we see a 30% drop in, this metric to that metric in our funnel, well, how do we solve that? Okay, well, here's a variety of things we could do. Here's some tactics that might stop the bleeding. In fact, I think it's more important to understand like what are the variety of reasons that might be contributing to that, and which of these are the biggest areas for us to go and investigate. Do we have enough information about any one of these opportunities? So I really lean into opportunity solution trees. Really encourage my teams to go very deep in opportunity assessment before they even get down to solutions, because everybody can have solutions, right? The question is like, are you working on the most important areas, and do those solutions actually align to those important opportunities? Or are you working on a solution that is actually organized like something that only impacts 10% of users when there's really this other big opportunity area that impacts 90% of users? So a test in that area versus the other area would be that much more effective or have that much more potential.
Can you talk a little bit about an opportunity tree? I've heard that before, but I've not gotten to the details of it. Could you give an example of what that looks like for you?
Yeah, so opportunity trees are, I can't take credit for them. So I really lean into the collective wisdom and knowledge of peers across the product industry and discipline, really, honestly. So I stumbled upon a friend of mine actually a few years back, shared an article from Teresa Torres where she kind of talks a little bit about opportunity assessment trees and really why we need to do more discovery in opportunities. We spend a lot of time, teams spend so much time brainstorming what ideas, what features, what things can we build, and not a lot of time and talking about and doing brainstorms around, well, what are the different areas that we could go and do research in and explore and potentially pick, features to solve within. So really the way that this works and the way that I have enabled my teams to kind of leverage this kind of concept or framework is you start really with your objective, your outcome. So, for a particular team, it could be, increase, the rate of profile completion. So we want people to complete their profiles at a higher rate than they are today. And there could be then a variety of reasons why people aren't completing their profiles. The onboarding process is too long. The onboarding process is unclear. I don't have time. I don't have all the things that I need to actually finish my onboarding step. I don't want to publish my profile because I'm not sure what it's going to look like. And so there are a bunch of big then areas which could potentially be causing this friction, right? You might have said, well, if people aren't completing their profiles, it must be because onboarding is too long. So let's go fix onboarding. Well, you might not have explored, well, onboarding is unclear, or I don't have the pictures on my phone that I need, and so I have to go ask a friend for it, right? And so there are all these gaps then that could basically present themselves that you would not have explored. And so the way that this works is, rather than jumping to solutions, you actually start with, what are all the things that could potentially be contributing to this problem? Or what are the areas that if we went to explore, or we went to go ask users about, might be contributing to either, harm or benefit. And so you can do it for a variety of anything, honestly. You can even opportunity, assess your own career, right? If I want to become a CPO one day, well, what are the things that I would need to do? Well, I need to go, read up on, the industry. I need to go get some mentors. I need to, hold these different types of positions. I need to get access to these types of projects. And throughout then you can start to create a plan for how might you go and actually facilitate those things. So really that's where we start. We kind of start with that KR, if it's profile completion, right? And then we're going to talk about all the ways in which users might be impeded or success might be facilitated through. And then we'll have work with data science with our research teams to go and, do we have the data on this? Maybe we do, maybe we don't. Maybe we need to go conduct research or go do some analysis. And then it's from there that when you can assign kind of some opportunity sizes to those different opportunities, that you can start to work with a team to really start to go, really just let your imaginations run wild and say, what are all the ways in which we could actually solve these problems or make this thing even better? And then from there, it's just really about executing on different A/B tests and having your hypotheses pretty tight and your experiment frameworks, clearly articulated, and then going to deliver. And I found that with this kind of framework, my teams are able to do, 30 to 40% more effective tests and actually get way more learnings out. Because you're not just building to go fundamentally change something, you're really building to learn here and to influence.
Yeah, I see that as a great lateral thinking methodology where someone might fixate on a problem and maybe the problem adjacent to it on each side, but this tree just says every possible problem in that relative domain needs to be uncovered. And that sort of brainstorming experience that does require some creativity can really have an impact. I really love that. One of the things... Go ahead.
Well, I mean, the nice thing about that is, well, now you have a whole roadmap, right? So you're not having then to go back and say, all right, well, this thing didn't work. Now we have to go through this process all over again. You kind of did all of that work up front. And so if this particular feature or test that you aligned on doesn't produce the results that you were interested in or you thought it would, you have a very clear way to say all right, well, this didn't do that. Let's understand why. And here then are a bunch of other areas that we could go explore. And so you're not stuck then. And I think that's a really nice piece about all of this, is that you put in more upfront work, but the reward is, it shows itself in terms of your efficiency and your velocity over time.
Yeah, I really like that, because now that it's created a roadmap and you've used the word opportunity as opposed to some other word that may have a negative connotation, now they're oh, this is a way where we can explore and grow. And so all these domains just fit really nicely together. I love the way you positioned this, and it's something that I'm written down and going to take away from my team here. A piece of advice you like to give when coaching your product team is to take smaller bets. So could you talk to us a little bit about how your experience got you to giving that advice, and if there is any examples of where that's really done you a solid?
Yeah, no, I do think that taking smaller swings or smaller bets is, to me, honestly, one of the most underrated pieces of product. I think that especially early in PM's careers, and and anyone, you want to see the things that you're doing really change, the way that users are interacting with your product, and have these really big drastic visual changes that oftentimes are really risky. They take a long time to build. They're kind of a paradigm shift in terms of how people interact and use a product. So they are they take much longer. I love to pair these kind of bigger paradigm, bigger bets with smaller quick wins learning tests. And the way that I think about this is really a balanced portfolio approach of what can I do that is like really, really quick and easy to execute upon that will help me gain learnings, that will give me the ability for me, my team, people around the organization to have a better understanding of how users are interacting and engaging with the product and help us make more measured, bets when we are going to execute on bigger bets. So one of the things that, early in my career where I discovered this was honestly my first role at Kayak, where I was kind of charged with like owning hotels desktop. And I had really never really conducted an A/B test before, in my career at that point, where I had, obviously a science major. So we did some science, experiments there. And so that's kind of like a good parallel, but never a true kind of A/B test. And so, I started just analyzing, unpacking, like how are our users interacting with our product today? And I kept on coming back to this insight that, in order for a user to get to the part of the booking flow where they were able to purchase, and for us as a business at Kayak to make money, which is we are based on a click-through rate, so we got paid every time a person clicked the select button at the time. That was like really the most friction point, right, for both the business growing and for both the user completing their interaction in that funnel. And I started trying to understand, like, why are people not clicking this button? Like, what's getting them all the way through discovery, through search, through typing things in, but then when they get here, they're not making that action. Because this action will get you more information about the hotel, right, that you're interested in learning more about. But it turns out that button is called select. And when I started thinking about our users and trying to really look at the different personas of users, well, it turns out that people are coming to Kayak pretty infrequently. They're not coming every single day and booking travel every single day. Hotels are also fairly costly, right? And so I'm going to have to put a pretty big expenditure. I have to feel really confident and comfortable that this place is the place for me, both in terms of a variety of factors, maybe safety, maybe cost, maybe location, right? Maybe access. And so clicking the word select, maybe as a user who's not as accustomed to what happens when I go to buy something, it doesn't say add to cart, it doesn't say view more, right? It says select, which is a very, very strong word when you're trying to purchase something. And so I said, well, maybe we need that word is prohibitive. And so what if we actually change that word to be something that was more inviting, that was more reflective of what that button was going to do, which was going to show you the variety of other deals that you could basically get with this hotel. So we did an A/B test that basically changed the word from select to view deal, which drove a 10% increase in revenue. But that small little change, because now it was less quote unquote scary, right, for someone to click that button to get to the next part of that journey. And that was an incredible insight that I learned, I held with me through my entire career, up into this very moment here at Hinge, where, our team is trying to figure out, well, how do we help users who are stuck, right? When they don't know where to go next, maybe they have sent all their likes or they're just not having the success that they need. Can we use different parts of the app experience to help nudge them or guide them to do something that we know will help them within their, their time at Hinge, on Hinge? There are a lot of really big things that we can do that we have in the works. But one of the things that the team noticed was that, like, hey, we have this empty state when you're in your matches list where you don't have any matches, you don't have any incoming likes. And it just says like, hey, come back later, like likes kind of come in, over time, don't worry about it. But there's nothing else that it's telling you to do. It's not really nudging you or helping you along to go get more likes. And so we did a very quick test in the empty state there where we basically added a few different CTAs that will help drive users to take some different action dependent on kind of where they are in the app and where that empty state might live. And that drove a 13% increase to the engagement of the particular thing that we were looking at in that case.
That's a great
And those are
example.
very, very small tests, right? Like that particular test took, less than a day to design and, only a few days to implement. And it had that phenomenal outcome in terms of both helping our users get better outcomes, but also helping our business. And so this is really kind of where these quick hits or these smaller tests really come into play. It's a tool. I think about it like a plumber. If a plumber comes into your house, they're going to fix, your broken sink. They're coming with a light on their head. They're coming with a wrench in one hand and maybe a screwdriver in the other. They have a bunch of different tools that they're using in a variety of different ways at different times. In the same way, I think that a product manager has a variety of different tools in their toolkit. And it's just about when do you employ those different tools and how do you use them to work together. A wrench without light, right, under a sink won't do much. You don't have light, you won't be able to see.
Absolutely. Just to close things down here with a final and maybe slightly off-topic question. You recently joined as a mentor with First Round Capital. Can you talk about what that experience has been like for you?
Yeah, so this is something fairly new to me. We actually just kicked this off just earlier this month, so I don't have a ton of insights from kind of how this particular mentorship experience is going. I can say that mentorship has always been something that has played a significant role in my life. And has helped, I can reach out to a variety of both close friends and mentors and advisors when I'm battling decisions that I need to make, right? So should I approach this problem that way or this way? Or, hey, I had this great idea, here are the ways that I'm thinking about it. What would you do? Or have you encountered a situation like this? I think that mentors and advisors and people in your life you can turn to are really great to help act as a sounding board for your own thinking, right? Hold you accountable for things that you say that you're going to do and want to accomplish. I've been lucky enough to be mentored and to have advisors, and I've mentored in a variety of different, organizations. So I'm from South Texas, and I mentor upcoming high school students who are in the STEM who want to kind of go into a technology or engineering or mathematical kind of pathway. And just really show them that there is a pathway. Not every pathway has to be direct, right, with XYZ steps, that there are a variety of ways to go into some different fields, and also that there are people around that you don't have to do this on your own, that you really have the ability to lean into the help of your community and of your network. Even if you don't have, parents or role models in your own life, that you can go out there and really find people who can help you along the way. And that's why I do it, right? I think I grew up in a lower income family. I didn't have that blueprint of, well, here's where you go from high school, and here's how you apply to college, and here's how you get your first job. And so I had to go out there and seek that, and I want to be able to kind of give back in that same way.
Amazing. And just to wind down, where can listeners find and connect with you?
Yeah, so I'm just on LinkedIn. I'm at /MICHC Parsons that's it.
Michelle, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast today.
All right. Thanks so much.